for joining us. It's great to have everyone here. I hope you all had a great break if I haven't seen you since you got back. Today we have Dr. Nosek from St. Michael's College, and Dr. Nosek's going to talk to us about her research and switching gears a little bit from what we've been doing the past few weeks. She's going to be talking to us a lot about language, from what I can take away from reading your research, and really thinking about how people talk about chronic health conditions and how we are influenced by media and those around us in terms of how we think about our chronic health conditions. And today in particular, we're talking about chronic pain. So join me in welcoming Dr. Nosek.
Thank you. All right, so let's do the hearing test. Is this good? Can everybody hear me in the back? Awesome, thank you. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey to where I am today. It was very linear, a little bit of serendipity in where I ended up. But I'm from a small town in upstate New York, and I'm SUNY educated all the way through. So state universities for me all the way. I went to graduated high school in '99 and went off to SUNY Brockport, which is out near Rochester, New York. And I wrote an essay in first grade that I wanted to be a teacher, and that I still have that essay, and that has never changed. And then when I showed up at Brockport, I fell in love with psychology and just being on a college campus, and I decided I always wanted to be on college campuses. So, I want to be a professor of psychology. And so, I found my mentor. He was my health psychology professor, and I just found myself, in that class and social psychology. I just couldn't. I was so enraptured, by what they were saying, and I'd go home and I'd be excited to read the textbook. And so I always tell my students, pay attention to those classes or that chapter or that study that you're telling your friends about and telling your parents about because you're so excited about it, and go with it because that's trying to tell you something. So when it came time to look for graduate programs, because of course about the time that I was in my sophomore junior year, it became pretty standard to have your PhD if you're going to be doing this job. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm getting my PhD, whatever that is. And first generation college student, I was like, what is that? I had to learn about it. Had to learn all about that part of my journey. And I found this great program at Stony Brook University, again, SUNY school out on Long Island. And it was a social health combined program, and it was perfect. So I was able to take my interest in social psychology, health psychology, and sociology, because those two weren't enough, and take go to that program and learn how to bring it all together. And so, I taught. My first teaching experience was 2 years at Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, Mass. And started looking at metaphors there. I had, before that time, my dissertation was on stigma and cancer, and specifically comparing lung cancer and breast cancer, and whether or not people would be more willing to fund programs to help people with breast cancer than lung cancer due to stigma. And then at Mount Holyoke, I really expanded my work by saying, gee, when it comes to cancer, it's all about metaphors, right? Cancer is a battle, cancer is a journey, and I set out to explore how that language could either alleviate stigma or worsen stigma. And I really didn't know what I was going to find, and I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, so I will be tying that into my talk today. But ever since then, I went on to, I was at Southern Vermont College in Bennington for 9 years, and then when they closed, I moved up to St. Michael's College. So that's what I've been, this is what I've been doing there with some really amazing students, and I'm excited to tell you more about my research journey today. So, and if you have any other questions or certainly anything after that you want to ask me, and keep in touch, whatever, we can certainly talk more about all that. So the title of my talk is Using Metaphors to Communicate About Chronic Pain, The Journey Toward a Shared Language. I always have the longest titles ever. I just feel like I have to put all that important stuff in there. So sorry about the long title, but hopefully by the end of my talk, you'll see why each part is important to me. So chronic pain, there's a little bit of back and forth about how long pain has to persist for until you can call it chronic, but most sources will say that it persists for more than 3 months despite every effort to heal. So you might have, someone has an acute injury and they have surgery and, they're put on medication and yet the pain is still there. Or you might have, someone who all of a sudden wakes up one morning and has widespread pain sort of everywhere with no known explanation. But 3+ months is sort of the standard. And it affects approximately 20.4% of adults in the United States. And I've seen other sources that say that most of us at some point in our life will likely suffer from chronic pain of some sort, whether that's arthritis or back pain. And so, imagine how surprised I was to find that there isn't a lot of research specifically on the psychological or the psychosocial experience of having chronic pain, and especially with certain populations. And I found that stigmatization may play a role just in my earlier, just like in my earlier research with cancer. And something kind of was an aha moment for me when I read about this description of chronic pain stigma as a paradox. This goes back to Irving Goffman's stuff on stigma and what stigma is, and he makes a distinction between conditions that, if we're talking about health, conditions that are visible, so there are visible things about the condition or its treatment effects, etc., that you can see right away when you meet someone. And then there are aspects that are not visible right away. But as it turns out, both types of stigmas can result in either internalized or more external signs of stigma. So the visible effects can result in social anxiety. So if your pain becomes visible through crutches, braces, some sort like that, or wheelchairs, and you could cause social anxiety, right? Because you're thinking about the stigma. But there's also invisible aspects. So even if people don't know that you suffer from chronic pain, there's always the chance that they might learn, right? It might be exposed, or you can't do what they're doing as an activity, and so you isolate. So either, whether the pain is visible right away or remains invisible, there are challenges. I put a picture of Florence Nightingale here. A lot of people know of Florence Nightingale. She's a very important historical figure. She, is considered the founder of modern nursing. She was an incredible, empowered and empowering woman. But not everyone knows that Florence Nightingale suffered from chronic pain for most of her life. She took meticulous notes because she was a nerd like me. We do those things. And so from those notes, we're able to look back and say, what, it sounds like she probably suffered from fibromyalgia. So we'll never know for sure because fibromyalgia was not a thing back then. It wasn't diagnosed. It wasn't even in the realm of our reality. In fact, she has also been, they call it Nightingale's disease or Nightingale's condition. So some people still think it was slightly different from fibromyalgia, and some people say, no, we're pretty sure that that's what it was. But she says, there's no part of my life upon which I can look back without pain. So this is not a new thing, right? Chronic pain is not a modern invention. It's been around forever, and unfortunately, so has the stigma. So if you ask why chronic pain is stigmatized, this is just, I was looking for some resources that I could leave you with that, journal articles are great, YouTube videos are great. I got a couple of those coming up. But every once in a while you just need like a Psychology Today, right, article that puts things together in a way where you don't have to really figure out the jargon, etc. So this is the Rampelli Psychology Today that you'll see in the resources, and it talks about how 3 aspects of the chronic pain stigma are that, one, pain is gendered, and so in my work on stigma, I've noticed that there's a lot of intersectionality. So stigmatization and marginalization, unfortunately, are from many factors that sort of get piled on top of one another. So here, because women are more likely to experience chronic pain for biological and social reasons, women are also more likely to express that they have chronic pain, right, for more socialized reasons. So women are sort of allowed to be emotional about things and express those emotions and express how they feel, and men are more encouraged to keep that to yourself, don't complain, right, be stoic, remain stoic. And so we have to be careful when we look at statistics of chronic pain, because they might be skewed by the fact that men, might be suffering from chronic pain more than we know, but they're not coming forward. And there certainly is a paradox, there's that word again, right, for women, because yes, it's more acceptable for them to come forward to say, I have chronic pain and I need support or I need help, but as it turns out, they're facing prejudice with that as well, which segues into the next point, which is that many people believe that pain is psychosomatic. And chronic pain does have a psychological component, right? Our minds and bodies are connected. I say that with force because I feel like I'm trying to, sell that, especially in, the Western world and our culture all the time. But yes, the mind and body are connected. Your mind, the way you think affects how you feel affects how you think. And so, but there's this belief system that symptoms being reported related to chronic pain are solely psychological. In other words, it's in their head, right? There's nothing somatic and nothing medical that can explain chronic pain. That's the belief, that's the myth. And so, if you look at physicians' notes from many years ago, they warned of particularly women with chronic pain who are dramatic, attention-seeking, hysterical even, right? There's hysteria that we need to deal with as physicians because there's nothing medical going on here. And again, the intersection goes on to say that that's an entire cultural belief, right? We live in an analgesic culture, which basically says that, listen, pain should be acute. It should be diagnosable. You should be able to see it, right, on an X-ray and fix it. It should be fixable and curable. And the fact that it's not, goes to show that it is not a somatic or medical condition. Yeah?
Can you define that word?
Analgesic? Yeah. Oh, geez. Can I define it? I would say...
Analgesic is to remove pain in medication.
I think that's one application of it, and I think here it's sort of theoretically, in a broader way, saying that we have a culture that, if something's wrong, we should be able to diagnose it, treat it, and move on, right? So medication and traditional treatments should do the trick, right? Does that sound? Yeah.
So that in turn would be something like a lot of misdiagnosing happening because I have lupus and they tried to diagnose me with fibromyalgia and I had to do a lot of my own note taking for 2 or 3 years before I was finally diagnosed with lupus.
Yeah.
They just immediately said fibromyalgia, fibromyalgia, and I said absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because I was hysterical and I was dramatic, and I had to be my own medical advocate until they finally diagnosed me with something that I knew it was.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I hear that so much, that it not only does it take a long time to diagnose chronic pain, but as time goes on, the patient is experiencing that pain, and that's what they're looking for help with, right? That's what I don't want to give. I want to validate your experience, but not steal it. But yeah, this is what my participants and my students and people I talk to tell me, that it just takes too long. There's usually one or two at least misdiagnoses in there. Oh, let me send you to this specialist. Let me send you to this specialist. In the meantime, whatever's causing the damage, causing the pain, could potentially get worse. Yeah, and I think you're also highlighting another paradox, right, in that now that we have a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, now I'm finally seeing commercials for different medications that they're using for it, like Lyrica, for example. Now we might run the risk of everything's fibromyalgia. So,
right, and then you're giving people medicine that they don't essentially need. They need lupus medicine or RA medicine.
So that's more time that they're not being, so there's, there's layers to this, and there's so much to unpack, and it's a lot, but it's worth it, right? We need to be doing it. Please, if you have questions or things like that along the way, please let me know, because this is all about, what I'm trying to do here. Hold on, is that the next slide? Oh yeah, great segue. I love a good segue. Is tell people's stories. I'm trained as a quantitative researcher, so I spent many years doing experiments and surveys, and tell me which bubble sounds most like you. And not to knock quantitative research, I'm still doing it, but now I do mixed methods, and a lot of this has been qualitative. So I'm hoping you don't have too many questions about qualitative research, because my students are really learning it as we go. But I think at the heart of what we're doing is, we want to tell people's stories. We want to hear people's voices, as opposed to distancing ourselves from the research. So this is just the beginning, but we're excited to find more. So I'm going to talk about two studies today. One was done with a capstone. We have a capstone option for seniors at St. Michael's College, and you can do research with a faculty member for the fall and spring semester, and that's your capstone experience. So study one was one of those projects with a student, Caitlin Root, who's now in our graduate program, and she came to me and said, I want to do some research with you. What do you got going on? And I mentioned I was starting to get into looking at metaphors and language with chronic pain in the way that I'd done with looking at cancer. And she was into it, so we said, let's do this. So I wanted to do some expressive writing. I don't know if you've heard the research on expressive writing paradigm and the benefits of writing as a way of disclosing and processing through a traumatic event or something that's happening in your life. And so that was the nature of this study. And I'll tell you more about all of that in a couple minutes. But our research question was, how do college students with chronic pain describe their lived experiences and challenges, and what is the role of metaphors? And then I'll tell you about study two, which is ongoing, working with a student, another capstone student, Celia Durgan, who is helping me look at how people with chronic pain communicate online, and especially on blogging platforms as the community. And what is the role of metaphors? And then we added art, because we noticed it's a thing, and it's, people are doing it. They're sharing memes and photographs and original and other works of art to communicate, and also because she's a double major in psychology and art, so I thought, great, she has some expertise that I don't have, and so we're doing that currently. checking my time because I like to talk. Okay, I think we're doing good. Got it. So for study one, just a little bit of background. Again, I mentioned before when Caitlin and I sat down to, to do the first thing you go to the literature, see what's been done. We were surprised to find that, especially when it came to college students, very little had been done on looking at the experience, the lived experiences with chronic pain. And you can imagine that even though 2 million people with chronic pain in the U.S. are between the ages of 18 and 24, which includes many, not all, but many undergraduate students, that there should be work out there. What we found was a division in the literature. There was a little bit on like high school age, secondary, like adolescents, and then some on older adults. But then there was this gap in the middle where nobody was looking at the experiences of this age group. A few of the studies we did find said that college students with chronic pain do experience invalidation. So people say, you're too young. Pain is something that happens when you're older. We don't believe you. And so maybe even more than the typical or the older adults would experience. Feeling stigmatized, feeling that they don't have support, that when they try to seek support from members of their social network, they might try, but they don't understand. And so it's difficult to communicate at a level where they can open themselves up to support but not stigma. And outcomes, lower life satisfaction, mental health, that's anxiety, depression, stress, some substance abuse issues potentially, and academic challenges. So, being a college student with chronic pain and all of the things that encapsulates. So, we wondered, metaphors have been useful in creating a shared language for other health conditions. Again, my background was looking at this in the context of cancer. And so we said, what's going on with metaphors in chronic pain? Are people using them? Are young people using them? Do they write about them, if we give them the opportunity to do so? And what do these metaphors look like? In the cancer area, you'll find that most of the research on metaphors talks about two in particular, and I'm going to read for a little bit if you can excuse me for doing that. I didn't want to miss anything. So the battle metaphor is one, right? So cancer is the enemy. Patients must fight to win the battle and become survivors. Now, my thought process when I first started doing this research was, gee, it's a great metaphor if you're winning, right? But what if you're losing? Or how does it feel to someone who has cancer and might feel as though they're battling their own body, right? Perhaps opens you up to some further stigmatization. And then I sort of started looking at this journey metaphor that's a little bit new, but you'll see that in the media too. Cancer's a road to travel along life's journey. It might be bumpy. You might face obstacles, but when you reach your destination, you'll have grown, right? You'll experience personal growth and you'll find meaning. And so I thought, gee, that sounds a little more positive, a little more, it's a process, right? It's a journey. And I thought in my research I would find that the journey metaphor, good, battle metaphor, bad. And as it turns out, even in my research looking at cancer, and some of the research that I used as background and as inspiration found that actually metaphors are good. Some metaphors work better for some patients and others prefer others, but for the most part what metaphors do is create a shared language, a way to communicate with your support providers, healthcare providers, family members, friends, loved ones, significant others, that they understand. And what Caitlin and I found was that the very little literature that was out there on chronic pain is that they don't have that. That shared language that boils down to two metaphors that everybody uses. And in fact, the metaphors are much more complex and much more, the goal, right, of the metaphors are different. So I wanted to, just to remind you of the research question, how do college students, specifically with chronic pain, describe their lived experiences and challenges, and what is the role of metaphors? I was looking for something, because again, I'm here saying, oh, it's about people's stories, the people's voices, and you're hearing mine, right? So I wanted to see, I was like, is there something I could play for them, a short video where they could hear some of what the participants have been saying or writing in our studies. And so I've got this really short, it's just a 2-minute, it's a 2-minute clip of an 8-minute video. Again, it's going to be in your resources if you want to watch the rest. It does go into more about some of the stuff I've been talking about. What is chronic pain? What is it like to go through and try to cope with it and live with it, and that kind of stuff. But I wanted you to hear the beginning, because this is where the metaphors, you can really hear them.
Most people have no clue that in 2023, the best way to make money on Amazon is not with physical products. It's Amazon's other company.
You're like, oh, slow down. Why are you doing so much? My pain is like red hot lava radiating through my whole body.
Most days I feel like a tin man, but also I think getting pounded with a hammer all over. It's almost like there's too much for my senses to handle. Sometimes it feels like there's somebody out there who has a voodoo doll and they're stabbing me all over, in my legs, in my arms, in my back. The pain is like a cage or a lattice underneath my rib cage, pushing outwards through my ribs, trying to push its way out of my body.
I often feel like I'm not in control of my body, like I'm being controlled by an evil puppeteer who's tied knots in my muscles and pulled my strings really tight, and it really hurts. It feels like I'm carrying 2 massive heavy buckets of water in each hand every minute of the day.
So that's what people tell you when you ask them, what's it like? What's it feel like to live in pain? And I have, I've heard and read some of those before. You'll see the metaphors that have come out in our research, but there's always new ones, right? The cage, the lattice. But the one thing that doesn't change is that, and one thing I liked about this video is it shows it in color, right? It shows people trying to act it out. There's a lot of that when you're trying to explain a sensation or an experience that the person you're talking to has never experienced before. It's more complicated than just I'm on a journey or I'm in a battle. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we did and found. So we had 11 full-time undergraduate students. 10 were female identifying, 1 male identifying. Mean age was 20. They were all white or Caucasian. They were middle class. They were full-time students. So a very, uniform, participant pool, sample. So chronic pain conditions, however, there was quite a range, and this is another thing we're finding is that people who have chronic pain, there's so many different conditions and experiences out there that kind of makes sense, right? That it would be hard to find a common language, common metaphors, something that works for all of them. So we had, just in this very small sample, neck and spine, headaches and migraines, arthritis, tendinitis, joint pain, endometriosis, fibromyalgia, and some unspecified stomach, digestive, vomiting conditions. And what we asked them to do was to write for 4 consecutive days in response to the same prompt, and this is very Pennebaker, traditional Pennebaker expressive writing. So during the next 4 days, you'll be asked to write about your experience with chronic pain In your writing, try to let yourself go and write continuously about your deepest emotions and thoughts related to being a college student with chronic pain. You can choose to write about a specific experience, your everyday experience, or your overall experience with chronic pain. The primary task is to reflect on your most basic thoughts and emotions, and you'll have 20 minutes to complete this task. So we told them, specifically we want to know about you as a college student with chronic pain, but we let them decide whether they wanted to say, overall, this is what it's like, or pick a certain day or event that happened, or vent, really, right? It could be more emotional, more like, this is what's, I woke up in pain today and this is what I'm writing about. And I have to say that our participants really did a little of each. We were looking to see whether they would choose, as a pattern, choose one of those approaches over the other. But we saw a lot of, yesterday I talked about my overall experience. Today I want to focus on something someone said to me today. And so they sort of took advantage of all of them. So all in all, 44 expressive writing samples were coded. So we took all of those stories, right, that writing, and we put it all into a file and we coded it, and then we came up with coding manuals and coding forms, and we had 2 coding teams. So both teams sort of split the sample in half. So one team coded the odds, the other team coded the evens, and within those teams, the coders came to 100% agreement. Wow, did that take a lot of time. It is definitely, it takes a lot of time, but you know what? You get to know people and you get to know their stories, and there's no better way, I think, to do it than to take that time with it. So Caitlin worked her magic and did this wonderful thematic analysis. I'm going to share some of that with you today, not all of the findings, but focusing on the metaphors and the challenges, because there's a lot, even within just those 2 things. So I'm going to read again a little bit here. I got some quotes for you. I felt kind of funny putting the quotes sort of up there on the board. So I just thought I'd read them for you so you could hear them. So the metaphors we found in the thematic analysis, there were some classic metaphors. So we did see the battle and journey metaphors. Those are crossing over from other areas like the cancer research. So one quote from a participant, was, "The constant battle with pain has led me to feel extremely sad and anxious." Other people talked about that battle, the fight, the struggle, and other people talked about, the journey. It's been a long journey. Some days are really hard. My journey with endometriosis, et cetera, et cetera. So we did see those classic metaphors for sure. Another major category was causes of physical damage. That had been something we found in earlier research, specifically the research by Monday et al., which is also in the references. And they found that people with chronic pain use elaborate descriptors. They go deep, right, with their descriptions, because they're trying to convey the nature and intensity of the pain, and how the nature and intensity of the pain is different, right, from other kinds of experiences. So dull and heavy is different from shooting and stabbing. So one of the quotes from our sample was, "It feels like stepping on nails while having a shaft jammed through my ankles." You can imagine, right? Incredible pain. And then we also got a surprising theme that we took a little time figuring out what to call this. But again, this is a sample of college students, right, who live with their peers, go to classes with their peers, date their peers, and to them, they felt like they spent a lot of time talking about what chronic pain is not. So they would try to describe their pain to a roommate or a friend, and they would say, "Oh yeah, that's like when I go to the gym, right, and I pull a muscle," and it was like, no, I appreciate you're trying to empathize, but it's not like that. Or, oh God, yeah, I get such bad period cramps too, to someone who has endometriosis. And it's like, no, I appreciate you trying, but it's not like that. And so there was a lot of, that in the writing, what chronic pain is not. Oh, right, so I didn't read this for you yet. So the quote that I brought was, "My peers don't seem to comprehend that chronic pain is not the same as being sore or injured from exercise or being sick." So that was a theme, a surprising theme. The challenges, there were many. We tried to, when you do this type of research, you start with, like 20 categories. You say, can we get these down maybe to like something more manageable? So you'll see there's a lot within this, but we boiled it down to these 4. Academic difficulties were definitely there. Missing class, being uncomfortable when you're in class, not being able to focus on your work, fear of missing out, right? FOMO, do they still say that? The kids still say that these days. So there was definitely that. It changes too quick. I try to keep up. And professors even not understanding, right? Trying to get extensions, trying to say, listen, I was absent for a very legitimate reason, and kind of a range of responses from professors. Lack of permanent solutions, the idea that the journey, right, can feel like there's no end, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You try all these treatments, all these ways of coping, they work for a little while and then they stop working. And you realize that there might not ever be a permanent solution. So there's hopefulness, hopelessness, hopefulness, like a roller coaster. Impact on mental health. Many of our participants said that they had a mental health either diagnosis or something they identify with. So anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, feelings of hopelessness, fear of being perceived as overly dramatic or needy. And that will come up again in the future studies. And the need for social support, feeling lost, feeling misunderstood, feeling like no one understands, and it's affecting relationships. In some cases, there was teasing, being mocked, being given advice that wasn't asked for. And when we read those, it was pretty like, like it was, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. But it wasn't. It was only a few. But a couple of our participants' friend groups thought that the label they were giving them was all in fun, and they would laugh to not face social isolation or stigma, but they did not find it funny. But that was few and far between. So I'm going to do a general discussion on both of the studies after, so we'll talk a little bit more about what all of this means, but we found such similar themes, I decided to talk about it all together. Okay, should I check in, see if there's questions or anything yet, or anybody have any questions or things you'd like to share so far? Yeah?
When you say, when you say you coded the expression, the written expressions, what does that mean?
Yeah, so there's different approaches to doing more qualitative research, and some are some are more systematic than others. I think my quantitative training doesn't let me completely let go and do 100% qualitative, and so I try to put together a coding form that has some grounded theory, they call it, some expectations of what we think we might find. And then what happens is, typically you start out with that form and you say, okay, here's what we're going to look for, and here's, whenever you see this, right, code it, give it some meaning on the form. But as you get into actually reading the samples, you find a lot of times you have to go back and revise that coding. So there was a lot of that in the beginning. But if you do it, I hope I did it right, but if you do it, let's say if you do it diligently and with good intentions, you can get to a place where you have not only a way of coding on a form that works, but a manual where you could hand that manual off to other researchers and say, this is how we did it, it seemed to work, and they have something to start from. But at least your coding teams have something where, one, you can keep the information's a little more standardized across the 4 people who are reading these samples. And also you can leave with some data, right? Even though it's qualitative research, it's not about sophisticated statistics and softwares. It's not about that, right? It's about the people and their stories. But you get to say, this % of our sample, identified this, or so it gives you a little bit more of a systematic piece as well. Does that help?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
And like I said, it's learn as you go for me and my students. So. Yeah.
Why did you fall in love with psychology?
Oh, we're doing that now.
I just out of the options.
Well, I think for me, I didn't get a chance to take psychology or sociology in high school. They weren't doing that back then. So nowadays, thankfully that's changed. But I saw a lot of things around me growing up that I just didn't understand, and specifically around prejudice, the way that people group each other in different, like in groups versus out groups, us versus them. And sometimes it was so arbitrary to me, right? But it resulted in some real outcomes, mental health outcomes, bullying, those kinds of things. So I went off to college knowing that I wanted to learn more about people and how they behave, and more specifically why we can't just all get along. Like, that was my naive, that's what I wanted to do as an 18-year-old. And then, once I got to college, people are like, oh yeah, you'll change your major a couple times. Everybody does. And I didn't. From my intro class on, I just loved everything about it. And then when I found out that people were looking at, prejudice and discrimination in the way that I was thinking about it, and that social psychology specifically called to me because of its applications, because of what social psychologists were doing. They were going out into the world. I got to stop doing that. Going out into the world and studying things in healthcare, and studying things in the criminal justice system, and studying things in business and marketing. And so that really appealed to me. I was someone who kind of had a lot of different interests and didn't want to choose. So social psychology, and specifically applied social psych, allowed me to kind of do it all in a way that made sense.
That makes sense.
Thank you. It does now, right? 20 years ago, I was not so much. Makes it a little difficult to publish sometimes, because I'm like, okay, I'll go to the social psych journals and they're like, where's your theory? Like, there should be 5 pages of theory in this paper. I'll go to the health psych, journals, and they're like, wait, you're not working with people who have cancer? You're looking at perceptions of cancer? No, we don't do that. And then I had one journal on from the cognitive area, more on metaphors, who told me I don't know what metaphors are. Yeah. So I was like, okay. I think I'll just, before I internalize that and completely change what I'm doing, I think maybe I'll try another journal. And maybe I'm just not using metaphors the way you are. So that's, we can talk more about that later too.
That's great.
Yeah. So I'll tell you about study 2. We expanded a little bit and went to a more non-traditional way of doing things. But like I said, found some similar themes and some things that we can definitely work off of. So we found that people with chronic pain, because they do feel like they're misunderstood or not getting the support they need from traditional venues, have been looking for communities of others with similar lived experiences online. And so they're blogging and they're using social media, right? And I suspect, although I can't back this up with evidence, but I bet the pandemic also, exacerbated that, pushed even more people online because they're looking for that connection while social distancing, right? So we decided to do that, and then we found not a lot has been done, and so positive outcomes that some studies have reported on include, self-reported decreased social isolation, increased connectedness, and an opportunity to support each other without worrying about the stigmatization that can come from making pain visible. Right? These are other people who have similar experiences and are not going to stigmatize you for talking about those experiences and seeking support. So many studies have shown the benefits of expressive writing. Again, Pennebaker, has been around for a while, but there's not a lot that has been done on the benefits of illness narratives, they call it, through blogging. So people's stories, illness narratives, right? We're kind of talking about similar things with a slightly different language, but that's what it is. It's stories through blogging. So we wanted to, do our diligence. So our research question was, how do people with chronic pain communicate with one another online using blogging platforms? So again, it's going online, in this case, doing a content analysis. So instead of our participants being persons, individuals, it's blogs, right? So you can think of that as being sort of the units that we're studying. And we expanded from, this is not just college students, although I still care very much about that population. This is, everyone and anyone who is using online blogs. Excuse me. So I thought before we got into the researchy type stuff that I'd throw out another someone who you might have heard of and someone who really was an inspiration for myself and my student Celia, who's doing this work. We started this summer. And we're continuing this year, so it's a work in progress. But Frida Kahlo, right, is a famous Mexican artist who is known for her for lots of things, but especially for her stunning, beautiful, and expressive self-portraits. And I don't know, some people know about Frida Kahlo's chronic pain journey. Other people had no clue, or at least the extent of it. So I put a little timeline up here for you, but I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. At 6 years old, Frida contracted polio. And she was, lucky enough to survive, but it affected her right leg in a way that would cause her pain and stigmatization throughout her life. So her right leg ended up being shorter and thinner than her left leg, and so she walked with a limp. And as I said, she experienced some issues with that her entire life. But probably more impactful was at 18 years old, Frida got on board a bus with her boyfriend, as she'd done so many times before, and that bus collided with a tram. And many people died, several were injured, and Frida had very serious injuries, including a broken collarbone, a broken spine, a broken pelvis, a handrail impaled her uterus, which impacted, she had several miscarriages later on related to that injury, and she was hospitalized for a very long period of time, and that's when she started painting. If you look for images of Frida Kahlo painting some of her most famous works, it's in bed. They found a way that's where she started, and that's where she did some of her most seminal projects, because she had to. And so, again, between 1930 and 1935, she had several miscarriages, which also were related to the accident and had exacerbated her emotional and physical pain. And then one thing I want to go a little bit more into is this painting called The Wounded Deer. So Frida had been told about a surgery that gave her a lot of hope. She thought that she could go in and have this surgery done, and that her pain, at least her back pain, the pain that her spine was causing her, would be diminished or disappear. And when it didn't, The Wounded Deer was one of the paintings that came out of that, the need to express the disappointment for that. So I have a couple of minutes of a video to share with you here.
In an interview with the magazine Mexican Folkways, She said, they thought I was a realist, but I wasn't. I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality. Let's look more into this piece's background. The definition of karma is fate or destiny. In the majority of her self-portraits, Frida presents herself as being powerless to change the karma through which most of her sadness manifests. In this piece, also known as The Little Deer, Frida depicts herself as the deer that has taken several arrow wounds. The picture is extremely intimate and depicts karma's physical and mental manifestations as a result of her sickness. The story behind it is that after spending nearly 4 months in bed, Frida made the decision to travel to New York City in 1946 to see the renowned surgeon at the Hospital for Special Surgery. It had been highly recommended by her friend Arcady Bowler, who also had back issues, so she was hopeful of making a full recovery. After having surgery on her spine in 1946, which she had naively believed would relieve her of her back discomfort, Frida expresses the disappointment through the painting. By the way, Frida gave Arcady Bowler and his wife Lena the wounded deer on May 3rd as a thank you gift. She continued to experience severe depression and physical pain even when she returned to Mexico. In Frida Kahlo's picture, the wounded deer may stand in for a number of things, including physical suffering, emotional vulnerability, indigenous people who were oppressed by European invaders, or female strength and fertility. In fact, some say Granizo, Kahlo's pet deer, served as the inspiration for this work. The Wounded Deer is a powerful painting that showcases Frida Kahlo's ability to infuse her work with emotion and personal narrative. Whether the deer in the painting represents Frida herself or something entirely different, there's no denying the impact of the image and the message it conveys. So what do you think about the Wounded Deer? Does it resonate with you on a personal level, or do you see it as a commentary of a larger world?
So again, some speculation there, right? She was also very involved in politics and trying to bring attention to the needs of the indigenous people, so there could be some of that as well. But many people think that because of the timing, right? She just had the surgery, it was unsuccessful, that at least in some ways it was personally motivated by her experience with pain. So after this painting, and the one over there is called The Broken Column, that was another very clear depiction of her chronic pain experiences. She had after this surgery and others like it, unfortunately had a series of infections, amputations had to be done. She was confined to a wheelchair and then passed away from what they say was a pulmonary embolism, but there's some speculation that she may have taken her own life. She took too many, she had overdosed on her medication that night, but no autopsy was done, so it was not clear. But she says in this quote, the most powerful art is to make pain a healing talisman. So this is a famous artist who used art as a way to communicate about the pain experience. But we found that the everyday person is doing that too. That's what you're looking for in our study, and that's what we found. I'm sorry about all the words on this slide. You don't need to take all of this down. I just felt as though I needed to say it. So as far as our sample goes, again, these are not participants in a lab. These are blogs that we found that were publicly accessible, and published between the months of January and July, just to really narrow, we had to narrow the scope to make it manageable. And they had to be written on the subject of chronic pain. So we ended up with 92 blog posts. The mean number of words was 158, but really they ranged from a meme and a few words to, guys, I need to vent, and 400 words that were so deep with metaphor and descriptions. From 70 different bloggers, which means that we had, some repeats, some people who posted more often than others, and we included them all if they, if they were in that time frame and met the criteria. And in fact, some of those bloggers, we are now taking a deeper dive into their, finding their earlier posts and doing a thematic analysis that's a little more in depth. The Mighty and Tumblr were our two biggest platforms. A lot of people, especially older people, were using the Mighty. Tumblr tended to be a little bit younger, but those two were the most successful for us. 39% did not identify their gender, but of those who did, 27% were female identifying. And we do find, the research does report that, again, and we talked about here, female identifying individuals are more likely to experience / express having chronic pain. 54% did not identify their age. We did look to make sure they were over the age of 18 in different ways, but the mean age of those who did was 29. So we got a pretty good range of ages and gender identity. 36 chronic pain conditions were identified. So again, there's a lot of people in pain in many different ways. And I forget the exact number. I want to say definitely over 50% of the sample of the people blogging had more than one condition that they described in their post or in their hashtags. We counted those two. The most common were chronic illness, so side effects of cancer, treatment from cancer, HIV/AIDS, diabetes that led to pain. Migraines, heads, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, chronic fatigue, endometriosis, POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia, it's my best guess, my best try, syndrome, and fibromyalgia. And again, we did a very similar coding process, so we came up with things that we wanted to look for and expected to find. We created a form that we used, and then we met, Celia and I met, to look at what needed to be changed or updated to make it more standardized and make it more effective. And then Celia performed a thematic analysis on what we'd coded. And in terms of the metaphors, so we found that 62% of bloggers did use metaphors in their blogs. We found those classic metaphors again. Cheat sheet again. So the battle category, any mention of fighting, surviving, awfully on a daily basis, hashtag warrior, right? Hashtag chronic illness warrior, hashtag chronic pain warrior were very common. And also a sub-theme of pain as an antagonist. That annoying friend that won't go away, no matter how many times you tell them you don't want them there anymore. So pain as the enemy came up as a sub-theme of battle. Journey with a sub-theme of adventure. Things like the road is tough, the journey is long, it's been rocky and downhill lately. A lot of original poetry and a lot of journey metaphors in the poetry. We found so many that we were like, are we coding every time this person says journey? But it was very prevalent that is a common theme for poetry. Causes of physical damage, just like in the last study we found, was a huge one. So these are our best attempts at coming up with those categories. Fire, I'm having a flare-up. It's searing, burning. I feel like I'm in hell. Those were the fire metaphors. And then electrical was a sub-theme of fire. It had to do with zaps, zings, zingers, lightning bolts. That's electricity. Sharp, poking, prodding, stabbing, pins and needles. Heavy was hard to breathe, hard to move. I have to sink into my mattress, right? I feel as though there's a weight on my chest holding me down. And mechanical was like machinery with broken parts or parts that are immovable, or parts that are no longer working correctly. And then we have, we're still sort of, I don't know how Celia would feel about me calling it this, actually. We haven't decided. So I did this for you today, but I'm going to see what she thinks when I get home. But I'm calling it the self category. We saw a lot of people describing their identity, identifying with their communities in ways that we hadn't seen in the first study. So we saw a lot of hashtags too. Spoonie, Potsy, Zebra, Tubi, Cripple Punk, Chronic Pain Warrior, and then also this idea, especially in the poetry or art, I am glass, I'm a candle, right? Sometimes I'm flickering or burning out. I'm a bucket of spoons. The whole spoonie thing was new to both of us, but people would simply say, how many spoons do you have today? And it would go from, I have no spoons today, to actually I got a lot of spoons. So that was something, that was a common identity metaphor, and actually there were a lot of groups or communities within communities that were formed around that. Spirit could be anywhere from my spirit soars, my spirit flies. In other words, I'm not held to just my physical body that's always in pain, to the other side of that where the pain is soul crushing, it's killing my spirit. And then finally, lost. So I feel like I don't belong. I don't know whether I'm coming or going these days. I'm several different versions of myself. And I think it's that one, several different versions of myself, that led me to title this the self category. But again, we'll see how that ends up. And then in terms of the art, 40% of the bloggers did use some form of art. Encouraging memes would be like, stop trying to run on an empty tank. These are memes that I've seen. I'm old, so I still use Facebook. Too much. And I've seen them on Facebook, but the community, members of the community would grab them and say, I feel like this applies to us guys. And they were affirming, encouraging in a lot of ways, just keep going. You won't be here forever. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, why did you not use Facebook as one of your blog information collection?
Yeah, so we decided to look at the blogs first, because we were trying to extend the idea of expressive writing, and we felt like because blogs are sort of online journaling, like the closest thing you could get to the substantial writing that we had in the first sample, we started there. But actually it was a little difficult to find enough blogs, because it seems like people are going to social media, so Facebook and Instagram and those other ones. So we want to do it in the future, but we just felt we had so much material from this, we're going to continue with this first, but that's where I'm going next. And we just hired someone in the digital media major he was here for 2 weeks, and I was like, can I pick your brain? So I'm hoping he's going to help me with that. But it's a whole other, he's like, well, this could be a whole other project, or it could be an entire career, depending on how you define it. So we're going to work on that. Yeah.
Did you use the same analysis techniques to figure it out?
Yeah, pretty much the same. This one was a little bit more systematic, a little bit more frequencies. So 60% use this, 40% use that. So we have, I entered anything quantitative from the coding into SPSS and analyzed it. And so that's why you see more, actual percentages. The first study was a bit more thematic, more about the themes, as opposed to counting, how many people said this, what percent said that. So, yeah, but for the most part, very similar process. Yeah. So memes were a big one. Encouraging memes, humorous memes. Have you seen this one? It's okay if you fall apart sometimes. Tacos fall apart and we still love them. I'd seen that one. But again, people are grabbing that and going into their chronic pain communities and saying, guys, right? This one. So there's a lot of that, some humor in there. Pets, people talked about their pets feeling lost, and then they adopted their dog, or their, somebody gave them a kitten. And so, it's them with their pets. And on the days where they have no spoons, they have their pets. So that was a lot of cute pictures of animals. And then selfies, lots of photographs of the self. And sometimes it's like, this is me smiling. Other days, this is me frowning. Other days it was silly faces. And other times it was just a little bit more artsy than that. But for the most part, they were, this is me, right? And I want you to see me, which kind of goes into the identity theme. And then images or paintings depicting pain. The original art was amazing. That some of these bloggers were real artists, and they just depicted their pain in really, really stunning ways. But some people used, we saw a lot of Frida Kahlo, so some people used, paintings or works of art that were already out there as well. And then as far as challenges, not a lot of surprises here, but consistency between the two studies. And I just want to mention that these are not mutually exclusive. So if you're adding it up and it adds to more than 100%, that's why. So in other words, most people, if not all, who mentioned challenges mentioned more than one. In fact, some people mentioned all of these and then some in their posts. So this is simply, you want to read this as the percent of people who mentioned having this challenge in the blogs, as opposed to, okay, we have 100%, and here's where everybody fell, each person fell. So mental health came back again. 30% identified either in the blog or in a hashtag that they had some mental health challenges. Feeling misunderstood, right? Trying to communicate with people who aren't understanding, and that's healthcare providers. It's family members, friends. One blogger said, we have another opioid crisis going on, and that is people who who have chronic pain and can't function are being denied medication because of, that stigma. So all of that fell into being misunderstood. Persistence again, so pain persists no matter what I do. Sleeping was surprising. We didn't have any reason to expect that not being able to sleep would be a substantial challenge, but it was so prominent that we added it to our coding form. And 23% of people said, not being able to sleep, to rest at night, to repair my body. And also, you're laying there in bed ruminating and thinking and just not able to turn off was a huge problem. And then feeling like they're losing control. Like nothing I do is working. I've lost control of myself, my body, my life. And so those were just the top 5 challenges we had. I think a total of 10 different categories. Some relating to waiting for a diagnosis, having problems finding a treatment that worked, were sort of sub themes that came up that we still need to make sense of. Sorry if it feels like I'm rushing. I'm over time. Just in general, people with chronic pain do face several challenges and are seeking to communicate about their experiencing using expressive writing, metaphors, and art. It's happening, and it should be studied. Strengths and limitations, the qualitative approach, like I said, has lots of benefits. We're able to hear people's stories and feel as though what we're saying is genuine and meaningful to the people that we care about, to this population. But we didn't have any interaction or contact with our population of interest. So what I'd like to do in the future is some interviews, maybe with some of these bloggers that we've found in the course of this study, or interviews with other people with chronic pain. But I'd really also like to talk to healthcare providers, because I think a lot of times they get vilified, and I don't think there's an intention to hurt people or ignore people or neglect people. I think part of it's the training. Healthcare providers are trying to find the underlying cause, right? Fix the pain, make the pain go away that way. And people are going to them because they're in pain and want treatment for the pain. And so interviewing them, and then more interventions that work, right? That can be informed by this research and what we know they need, this population needs, and is really looking for. Yeah.
Well, at least for me, I've lived in a couple different states. Most doctors don't want to find the underlying cause. They actually treat you more like a number. I've had to search very hard and high and low to find actual doctors who don't treat me like a number and want to find the underlying condition. So I don't know, I kind of agree to disagree with that statement.
Well, thank you. That's part of the reason why I'm doing this. Yeah, and you know, I've definitely heard that, and I really do think it goes back to this cultural, you know, that stuff we talked about in the beginning. This stigma has deep roots in the way that we are and the way that we've been. And for the most part, you see people who have chronic pain, and to some extent even, you know, people with cancer and other conditions are getting that response from the medical community. And so they're finding other ways themselves. They're like, if this isn't working, no one cares that it's not working. Nobody's giving me alternatives. You know, they're rolling their eyes at me. They're stigmatizing me. They're distancing from me. Let's try some, you know, acupuncture, massage, like blogging, expressive writing, because there is no other option for them, right? So thank you. I will definitely keep that in mind. I try to understand, I think, the other side, the other perspective. And I know there's a lot of burnout, especially these days, you know, in healthcare. So there's that too. Just feeling like I've got too many patients, not enough time. And also I've been trained not to get personal, right? So that's changing with the biopsychosocial model, but isn't where it needs to be, I think. I think we need to stay in touch. That's what I think. And just one last thing, I wanted to share a quote from Lady Gaga, because I wanted you to know that I'm a little bit cool also, in addition to the nerdiness. But if you haven't seen 5'2", the documentary, even if you're so good, right? Even if you're not, I'm not really a fan of the music so much, or at least the old stuff. She's coming around for me, but she talks about, and this is just a quote from a Vogue article that she did, people need to be more compassionate. Chronic pain is no joke, and it's every day waking up not knowing how you're going to feel. And in that film, you see a little bit, not a ton, because there's so much to cover, but of times where she's just in terrible pain, and she's got a video to shoot or a concert to do, and she can't stop, and she's got a team of doctors and masseuses and all these people working with her. And she says at one point in the film, what about people that don't have this team? She knows it, and she is aware of it, and she's trying to spread that awareness, and it's so true. She's got that team, not everybody does. So we need to all be doing this work. Okay, 2 pages of references and resources in really small fonts. Like I said, I wanted you to have, stuff if you wanted more info, and just acknowledging my students, Caitlin, Kira, and Swapnil, who helped with the coding and thought process of the research, Celia for the second study, and some money, because that always helps. Okay, thank you. So sorry I went over.
That's okay. So we're just about out of time. But if you do have a question, please feel free to come on down.
Yes, please do.
But thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll